Hello, everyone. Good morning, Just. And thanks for the kind introduction, Delia, and for the invitation to speak. I thought I was going to be telling the story of scientific reports. On reflection, it might be a collection of anecdotes, so apologies for that. I've been involved with scientific reports since 2013, and as Delia said, was the previous chief editor, and now I'm director of a portfolio of journals that includes scientific reports. So Scientific Reports launched in 2011 as a broad scope, inclusive, open access journal. It's a part of the Nature family of journals, so now known as Nature Portfolio. And back in 2011, this was a different kind of journal for the Nature group of journals to be launching. Of course, at that time, there was Nature, been around a long time, and many of our Nature research journals had launched, but those were very much had subscribed access. They didn't have an open access option until a few years ago in 2021. Nature Communications had launched the year before in 2010, but at that stage was still a hybrid journal. It didn't become fully OA until 2014. And our more recent fully OA journals, the Nature Partner journals and the Communication journals were yet to launch. So at the time, it was a significant step into open access for the group of journals. But perhaps more noteworthy is that Scientific Reports has this inclusive editorial model, so it doesn't reject papers based on significance. And of course, that's what many of those Nature journals are famed for doing. So one of our early challenges on the journal was to get buy-in for a very different type of publication, so get buy-in from the research communities into this, but also from colleagues as well. And one element of that is kind of philosophical, if you like. It's getting people to think about publication in a different way. It's getting them to buy into the concept that, as it says on the slide, not all research presents a major step in scientific understanding, but scientific progress is naturally incremental and all valid research must be available for progress to be made. And if every journal selected papers based on significance of advance, then scientific progress would be slow. We were helped somewhat in persuading people about this editorial buy model, and the fact we didn't invent it by any means. It was pioneered by BMC, Biomed Central as it was known then, which is now part of Springer Nature. Of course, it was scaled very successfully by PLOS One. It would be remiss of me to talk about Scientific Reports without mentioning PLOS One. And the model is now, of course, widespread. I've already mentioned Scientific Reports, BMC series. Discover is another portfolio of journals that has been launched by Nature, Springer Nature recently, which also shares this sound science model. So post-2011, what happened? Growth was healthy, steady for the first few years. And now, apologies, I'm going to talk about impact factors somewhat, or a fair bit in this slide. Scientific Reports and Springer Nature are proud to be signatories of DORA, and I think many of us know that impact factors are overused and misused, but I think it is an important part of the narrative when talking about Scientific Reports is growth. So growth was steady, healthy for the first few years, and then in 2014, the impact factor went above 5. This was a fun time. It was a challenging time. Submissions went up about threefold in about 3 months. There was some expectation that this would happen, but whether it would happen to that extent, I'm not sure we knew that would happen. So this created a lot of challenges in scaling up operations, in increasing many more staff, and increasing the size of our editorial boards. That growth was unlikely to be sustained and wasn't sustained. It actually peaked in 2017. A major driver of this was an impact factor drop. The impact factor went from just over 5 to about 4.5. There was considerable sensitivity to this in certain regions and certain communities, in China in particular. And so that drop-off in publications, a large driver of that was driven by the reaction of Chinese communities to this impact factor drop. Since 2018, we have seen, again, sort of steady overall growth, a little bit of a COVID effect in there at the end, but generally a return to growth post-2018. I've included the APCs at launch and now there just to kind of give an idea of, hopefully give some hint at financial sustainability and you know, the importance, the commercial importance of scientific reports to Springer Nature. I wouldn't want to suggest, though, that the growth, the development of scientific reports has been some kind of accident or entirely dictated by impact factors. Of course, that's not the case. At various stages and all stages of the journal's development, we have had to nurture the growth of the journal, and I've just sort of highlighted 4 particular areas where we have had initiatives to support growth. Transfers is a major one. Of course, Springer Nature is well set up as a large publishing company to support transfer routes. In the early days of the journal, transfers from Nature Communications were particularly important. Those journals were launched only a year apart and were very, very much scientific was supported by the success of Nature Communications. Since then, certainly post the formation of Springer Nature in 2015, we've been able to kind of develop and build further transfer pipelines into scientific reports. We've also expanded the scope of the journal a few times. We launched in natural sciences, and this was certainly in those days the key area of strength for Nature Publishing Group. And then we expanded into health sciences in 2014 and engineering and psychology in 2021. We've also at various stages had to kind of focus on specific regions. So I've already talked about China, so that's a good example to take. You know, we had to, China of course is an important market for us, as it is for many OA publishers and many journals. So we had to do an awful lot of work in terms of focused and tailored outreach, marketing, and editorial development in China to sort of return to growth there. And of course, it hopefully goes without saying that editorial board development is key for journals, certainly for many open access journals, and their engagement and the expansion of the editorial board has certainly supported growth. But I would argue that the fundamental and primary purpose of our editorial board and the value they offer to the journal is to ensure that our editorial criteria are upheld, which I've summarized on the left-hand side of this slide. So this is that scientific, for publication, all papers must be scientifically valid and technically sound in methodology and analysis, convincing with claims fully supported by data, and they must make an original contribution to existing knowledge. But papers are not rejected based on perceived importance, significance, or impact. So how do we achieve that? It's really about the people and the structures we have at the journal that allow us to achieve that. So the journal is run by a team of in-house editors. They lead the editorial board, they recruit them, they train them, they oversee them. The editorial board members, of course, handle peer review. It's quite a flat structure, really. And then we have a team of over 100 people in our support teams. They perform quality checks at submissions, so they're checking all papers for plagiarism, ethics compliance, for presence of data availability statements, all those sorts of things. But they also perform quality checks on all editorial, on all decisions made by board members. This has been a very important mechanism for the journal since launch, but it's a non-trivial process to manage and get right. Of course, we want our board members to have agency, to feel empowered, and we need to take steps to make sure that is the case. We need to make sure that the training and support of our board members is good, such that they are, by and by, making editorial decisions in line with these editorial criteria. But we have found that these checks, particularly in the early days of the journal, they really served to ensure that these criteria are upheld. So what do I mean by that? I mean that we were a journal, as I say, we launched into Nature Portfolio, it was Nature Publishing Group at the time, very well known for rejecting papers based on significance. Board members wanted to reject papers for significance. So we needed mechanisms to provide that feedback, to address those issues, to uphold those editorial criteria, those being the reasons that authors have submitted to us and the standards they expect us to uphold. And of course, on the flip side, those checks serve to ensure that peer review is adequate. So if peer review looks particularly light, if it looks like we've got the wrong reviewers, those things will be spotted, and we'll talk to board members about that and get those issues addressed. I'm just going to finish up. I feel like I'm ending on a negative vibe talking about rejection, but I'm just going to finish up talking a little bit about how and why board members reject papers. I mean, the reasons perhaps aren't so surprising, but the pie chart on the right just gives an illustration of that. I mean, the main reason for rejection is because papers aren't scientifically sound, but then about 10% is because they don't make an original contribution, and some integrity issues are picked up after review as well. The majority of those are picked up by those before review by those submission checks. And perhaps interestingly, perhaps unsurprisingly, I know you tell me if you're surprised, the accept rate has dropped over the years. I mean, we do make these accept rates, so we certainly have made these accept rates available since at least 2015. We have seen a drop. Some of the reasons underlying this or the major reason underlying this is a change in profile of submissions. The editorial criteria of the journal, let's say we've had those mechanisms in place since the launch of the journal to ensure that they are upheld. That's been key to the success of the journal and will continue to be key to the success of the journal. So I think what we're really seeing is this reduction is a response to profile in submissions. We see stronger growth in emerging regions, which tend to have lower accept rates. And we're seeing stronger growth in health sciences. So we could say our scope expansion has been successful, but it has come with the knock-on effect of reducing overall accept rates. Thank you.